everyone, my name is Sandra Domingo and I'm here today to talk to you about the authentic assessment. So, I'm quite excited to share my learnings with you and to be able to discuss what is authentic assessment. So, today we were going to answer the two questions which are what is authentic assessment and why it is important. So, are you ready to listen? And are you ready to learn? If yes, let's now discover and explore what is authentic assessment. But before we define what is authentic assessment, let us just define first what is authentic and what is assessment. So, what is authentic? Authentic means original. At the same time, it's real and genuine. So, authentic describe it's confirming to an original so as to reproduce essential features. And now, what is assessment? Assessment is a process of gathering and discussing information in order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of educational experiences. So, now what is authentic assessment? Authentic assessment. So, well, there are few definitions of authentic assessment. According to John Mueller, it is a form of assessment in which students through demonstrates meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. While in Richard Stegens, 1987, state that performance assessment call upon examinee to demonstrate specific skills and competencies that is applied the skills and knowledge they have mastered. Therefore, authentic assessment is defined as a process of determining the level of achieved learning of the student through demonstrate meaningful application of essential knowledge and skills. So, it means authentic assessment is that student abilities and knowledge are put the test in real-world setting through creative activities. So, student progress is measured in the way that is relevant to the abilities that will be needed of them once they finish their courses. So, do you understand what is authentic assessments? If not yet, once again. So, when it comes in authentic assessment, we defined as an activity or a form of assessment which make us a real world application or there be an actual application of the skill learned from the lesson and there is a real area or a real situation where they can use the skills which they acquired. So, in short, it is a method of evaluating student progress without the use of standardized tests. So, teachers use assessment to examine how effectively the students not only grasp in certain topics but also how they can apply what they've learned to a variety of situations and problems. So now, let's move on in the examples of authentic assessment. What are the different examples of authentic assessment? So, here are the following examples of authentic assessment. First is the portfolios. So, this is a remarkable collection of student work as well as in-depth assessment of how they apply their information. It reveals distinct aspects in student development, allowing teacher to measure the student progress and performance. So, students reflect on their goals and engage in some self-assessment as they prepare their respective portfolios. So the second is role-playing. So this is a sort of experiential learning in which the student takes on her role of a certain characters or role in well-defined learning situation. Role-play is similar to simulation games assign students to specific roles. So there are possible that learners will be asked to emulate personalities in unusual situations. So the third is the memo. So it uses first person point of view to convey information on specific subject. Students gather information and then use their imagination to weave together text from various angles. They can sometimes write in the voice of a real or imagine historical figure for a real or imaginary audience. Next is presentation. So this is the most popular technique of authentic assessment. Through presentation, the students have the opportunity to present their works and validate ideas in the mixed audience such as classmates, teachers, and parents. So throughout this presentation, the student confidence and communication abilities are developed and grow. Next is case study. As a teacher, you can have students to create case studies based on the real life situation relating to the topic. So the student must create a variety of close-ended questions and open-ended research questions, as well as collect real-time data from members of the research population through various methods such as surveys, interviews, and observations. Next is proposal. A proposal is well-researched document that demonstrates how student will address certain issues. The student must define his or her ideas, connect them to the particular aims and objectives, and justify approaches to the employed to solve problem in the situation. Next is reports. So student can observe real-life situation relating to a subject issues and produce a report on their findings within a certain time frame. So aside from this example, there are other examples of authentic assessment. These are journals, writing instrument or laboratories activities, writing stories, submitting original projects, performance certain skills and competencies, and so on. So these are the examples of authentic assessment. You observe that in authentic assessment, the knowledge acquired through learning by doing. So due to logical comprehension of the process and product, it is difficult to erase from the learner's mind because it is learning by doing. So what do you think? Why authentic assessment is important? So authentic assessment determines a learner's true level of learning. It is usually based on predefined criterion because it is criterion based in numerical evaluations rather than norm reference. There is a less room for competition in the class. Learners understand what is expected from his or her, and as we facilitator can highlight the problems that he or she experienced in during the evaluations process. So it offers the student the ability to improve on their own. Teachers have the opportunity to make them or learners appreciate real life applications through learning by doing. So because they will be assessed on how they learn, the outcomes of these sort of evaluations reduce learner fears of testing. So The authentic assessment are more probably engaging and motivating for learners since they entail real-world tasks. So, in short, authentic assessment yields better result for teachers as well as to the students because it is the real process of learning rather than simply marking off the gain from textbooks. So it verifies that students have acquired the materials and can apply it as needed.
Hello and good morning everyone. So my name is Gian and I'll be the one to discuss authentic assessment and its significance. This is to highlight our topics more and what we can do moving forward. So relax, sit back, and listen. So to formally start our discussion for today, let's first identify or define what is authentic and also the other meaning of assessment. Based on the reference provided, authentic is conforming to an original so as to reproduce essential features, including worthy of acceptance or belief. So meaning to say, on authentic, it focuses more on reliability, and this is accurate. While on assessment, this is a process of gathering and discussing information in order to develop a deep understanding of what students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experiences. So meaning to say, this is more pertaining to the outcome on the situation in which students give more of themselves to highlight what they have gotten throughout the entire journey. Alright, so next. Alright, and to make it clear more, we have to know or to identify authentic assessment completely. So to begin with, what is authentic assessment? Original, genuine, and reliable. So with these three words, authentic assessment is it is a form of assessment in which real-world activities is being utilized. So basically, it is focused more on what we can do moving forward in a real-life situation. And that is exactly what we need to highlight in terms of authentic assessment. And with highlighting those assessment or activities in which we can improve more, we have examples here that we can consider. And the first one is what we call simulated. Example of simulated is teaching demo that is also held in class, including students act like teachers. And with that, teachers can also act students. So basically, there is a simultaneous process in the end. Next, we have alternative. When we say alternative, it is an alteration we use for traditional way of teaching. It is what we have right now compared to what we usually have back then as a way of teaching, because we had the traditional way of teaching and we have now this alteration in order for us to be better and to do better. And lastly, as an example of this authentic assessment or activities, we have the most important one, which is performance-based. So basically, performance-based is what is being acquired as a student to our teachers that we are going to apply in a real-life situation. Let's say, for example, those learning that we got from them is something that we need to perform in order for us to see the outcome on what we have learned on the time frame or duration that we are studying. So that is a performance base that we need to see as an outcome. And we have the attributes of authentic assessment. It begins with a definite, concise, measurable criteria, which is the learning objectives of the teaching learning process that is informed to students. It also emphasizes demonstration of knowledge, skills, and competencies with foundations of what they can recall and learn. Basically, these attributes of authentic assessment more often refers to us facilitators, because we act as an instructor in which we provide assistance to our students to emphasize and to give knowledge to highlight their skills, and to let them learn on their own with the assistance that we are giving to them on a daily basis. So on this part, the goal is to teach the student, to provide the knowledge, and to assure that they can learn from us. And to make it clear, we have here traditional assessment versus authentic assessment as a comparison. When it comes to traditional assessment based on predetermined choice, such as multiple choice, supply type, alternate response, and others, it is grounded on a institution, mission. The learners must possess a certain body of knowledge of skills. So basically, it still focuses more on the traditional way of teaching that we used to encounter back then when we still have the face-to-face classes, because it follows the instruction that the institution would like to see as an outcome to our student, because it still focuses more on the pen and paper policy that we have. While on authentic assessment, it is based on the set of criteria that measures students' performance with respect to the set of learning outcomes. It is grounded on these institutions and mission as well. The learner must be capable of a certain body competency and skill. So before, this is way by far the traditional way of teaching or thinking that we have back then, because this focus more on what we can do as a performer, on how we can choose those things in terms of applying. So this is now on a field in which we grow, not just as a student but also as a person. And for the next one, the academe should teach the set of body of knowledge and skills. The school tests the acquired knowledge through pen and paper. Alright? So basically, the institution is still liable for the learning process that we undergo as a student in the traditional assessment, because they focus more on their policy on how they instigate learning towards their student, and the school are the one who provide the knowledge through those theory or pen and paper assessment that we used to have before. And an authentic assessment, the academe should help students achieve proficiency in achieving the skills or competency, and the school tests the acquired knowledge through tasks resemble in real life situation. So as you can see, there is a huge difference right now that we can highlight in terms of traditional assessment and authentic assessment. Okay, so let's use the word pen and paper. So that is how we learned before. We tend to focus more on writings, literary pieces, and other things that involves the use of words, critical thinking, and other subtopic that we need to consider. But on authentic assessment, this focus more on a daily basis in which we can apply those things in a real life situation. Let's say, for example, for performing a different task, role-playing would be a great example too. Lastly, this is to highlight the attributes of traditional assessment and authentic assessment. Alright, first we have action and response. When it comes to traditional assessment, it is selecting a response. Why? Because selecting a response also pertains to multiple choice or giving our students the option to choose out of the context or something that they want. While in authentic assessment, it is now about performing a task. Meaning to say, students perform a task that was learned from the previous lesson. So that is the attributes in the traditional assessment versus the authentic assessment. And to give emphasis more on this topic, we have this setting. In traditional assessment, we call it contrive or imagine, because as a learner, you have to imagine while reading or putting yourself on the character itself, because you have to consider being on that situation in order for you to achieve those things or to acquire learning. While in authentic assessment, it is a real-life application or simultaneous. Let's say, for example, you have that skills that you want to utilize. Role-playing would be the best option or example in which you can observe or apply it in a daily basis, because that is a real life situation that you can do what you are performing specifically on a daily routine. And third, we have method. In traditional assessment, we call it recall and recognition. So when we say recall and recognition, this pertains as a reminder. The most important thing to remind us of the pen and paper category that we have before, and also in authentic assessment, it is construction and application. So in traditional assessment, we use the term remembering. All right. So in authentic assessment, in method, this is to construct and to apply. So from remembering to construct or applying, this in which we choose to apply those skills that we acquired in learning moving forward. So that's for the method. The next thing that we have is focus. In traditional assessment, this is what we call teacher-structured, or we also call it teacher-centered, since our teachers are the one who provide instruction and even resolution on how this can be done. While in authentic assessment, this is a student-structured, or should I say student-centered rather, because students apply the skills. So this is up to us now on how we would like to proceed moving forward. And then lastly, we have outcomes. In traditional assessment, this is indirect evidences. Well, those indirect evidences pertains more to paper works and theory, literary pieces as part of a daily basis of traditional learning, assessment in a pen and paper. While on authentic assessment, we have direct evidence. So it doesn't only pertain to primary sources, but also in a real life situation. So this focus more on the life that we have right now, what we can do, and then what needs to be done, and how it should be done. So this is the attributes of traditional assessment and also authentic assessment. So alright, so that's it for authentic assessment and its significance. I hope you would be able to identify the difference between authentic assessment and traditional assessment as well. And right now, for the next continuation of the topic, it will be discussed by Ms. Hernaga. Take it off.
Five, four, three, two.
Hello guys, I am Giselle Hernaga, 21 years old from Bachelor of Culture and Arts Education, and I am your house guest teacher for today. And my task is to give you knowledge about PACES, principle, and better look of traditional and authentic assessment. The PACES of authentic assessment. The end goal of assessment is to progress a student's learning. We say that there is only learning when there is a change in behavior or demonstrable difference in skills and in knowledge. Manifestation of learning through a period of time such as portfolios, journals, or presentations, essays, and others are addressed by authentic assessment. Outcomes assessment goes through 5 phases to determine and close the cycle of learning. In the first stage, we determine what are the most essential learning outcomes that the learners need to learn and achieve. After the whole process, this is what we are looking for. Second, we determine the criteria and standard of outcomes performance, including the level of acceptability of the evidences of learning. We then implement the supporting activities that will facilitate our guide our learners to achieve the desired learning outcome. It would be an advantage for you if you know the limitations and
strength of the learners. This would give way to focus and highlight which among the criterion needs to be honed and developed. In the teaching learning process, you as a teacher act as a guide more than just a source. After we now then determine which among the desired learning outcomes are achieved and at what level of mastery. Implementation of the assessment is being done through measurement and evaluation tools. Lastly, the assessment results provide you with information whether the learners achieve the desired learning outcome and which needs improvement through validation and analysis. You can also determine whether your teaching strategy and technique is effective. So it will be easier to us to learn all the phases. Let us have examples activities in each phases. For phase 1, you have to identify the learner and you have to identify that you want your student to acquire a competency to recite a poem. That's the competency that you have to set. In phase 2, you have to determine specific criteria or skills. Now, on reciting a poem, you should have the skill to memorize, to pronounce clearly, to have appropriate rising and falling of tone. There should have appropriate gesture and appropriate eye contact. Now, for phase 3, you're going to teach your student. In teaching, you have to implement supporting experiences, instructional activities related to the criteria that you have set. You may show videos about how poems are recited. You should know how to pronounce of unfamiliar words and discuss how proper rising and falling of tones are applied. You should bring out this during your discussion. Now, for phase 4, you have to implement the strategies. This means that you have to determine and implement specific activities which will assess the learner's competency. To recite a poem, since the competency here can also be an activity, then you will just have to determine the right poem per student have to recite in front that suits their level of competency. In phase 5, you have to evaluate the result to determine the attainment of outcome and continuous improvement. This means that you are going to construct your rubric using that rubric and then assesses your students. Preferably, it would be better if your kind of rubric that we'll use is analytic because this will determine the skills students need to improve. And now let's move on to the principles of authentic assessment. First, assessments focuses on measuring what really matters by ensuring that clear criteria for assessments are evident to students. By measuring the big ideas in the learning, by reflecting measurement attention to the elements of content, process, and product in a carefully considered balance. 2. Assessment must provide valid indication of student competence by ensuring that assessment strategy assesses what it purports to assess. It's also by including realistic elements in the assessment and making them problem embedded. By ensuring that testing and assessment is comfortable for all students. And by using assessment strategies that promote the use of knowledge in real-life situation and context. 3. Assessment should encourage and guide further learning. By developing assessment that span the full range of learning expectations, by clearly communicating learning expectations to students. By using also techniques that clearly analyze the results of learning episodes, by including also students in the assessments of their work through peer and self-assessment, and also by ensuring that assessment is used for formative purposes as well as summative ones. By instructing also self-assessment opportunities that teach students how to respond to criteria for assessment and recognizes standards for assessment. It's also by setting standards through exposure to exemplars. By discussing assessments criteria with students before each task to guide their growth, by using rubrics as growth schemes to help guide students to produce work at the next level of achievement.
4. Assessment must be efficient. By using detailed descriptor of expected performance criteria and standard in rubrics, these provide clear vision of the targeted performance, give clear and consistent feedback in detail, and save the teacher marketing time. Knowledge is important as skills. The competencies of the learner should be based on their grasp of information and understanding. It is the foundation of the attaining the desired learning outcome. You, as the teacher, should start on this as it is the basic and the lowest among the hierarchy of learning. A well-established knowledge and cognitive skills will guarantee you a faster, efficient, and enjoyable teaching learning experience. It is important that we highlight that the mastery of knowledge and skills is the focus of traditional assessment. However, outcome-based education does not stop there. It is only the stepping stone to which you start with towards climbing the higher order thinking skills. Authentic assessments provides you with information as to whether the student achieved more than what should be known. This is through application of their knowledge and skills in real-life applications or simulations.
And that's all for today. I hope you enjoy our discussion for today and good luck to your journey. This is Giselle Heranaga from Bachelor of Culture and Arts signing off.